It's good to have all of you here worshiping today. If you're in Algona, you already know this, but we have a winter storm that's rolling in. And so we had planned two worship services, as Shelley had mentioned in the announcements. We planned this live stream service because we knew there's people, not just in Algona, but literally all around the country who follow us and who worship with us on a Sunday morning. But then we were all going to get in our cars and go down to the Kmart parking lot. Which is now not Kmart because Kmart's gone now, but the parking lot's still there. We were going to be up on a platform with a little loudspeaker system, and we're going to broadcast the worship service over the radio so people could sit in their cars and worship together, literally for the first time in probably 5-6 weeks, I'm guessing. Well, the winter storm killed all of that, and I made that announcement yesterday, and then I started getting a few text messages and a few phone calls, people saying, you know, we're just going to go down there anyway because you're still going to be on the radio, right? Yeah, we're going to be on the radio. So we're going to go down there anyway, and we're just going to meet whoever happens to be there. So I know our car is going to be down there, and there may be a few others. If you want to go down and wave at your friends and honk and hit your four-way flashers and say hi to everybody and worship together that way, feel free. Love to have you do it. So today's Easter. I have a movie that I've been thinking about this week in regards to this. It's a movie that came out in 1996, a long time ago, and it's called Courage Under Fire. It was Denzel Washington and Meg Ryan, and Meg Ryan is not playing her usual part, the pretty girl in the romantic comedies. She is a captain who is a helicopter pilot. And Denzel Washington's character is a guy by the name of Colonel Serling. Karen Walden has died, and she is now up for the Medal of Honor. And Colonel Serling, his job is to determine whether or not she's worthy of that. So here's what she does. Her helicopter and crew are sent into a battle zone where they are going to rescue another helicopter that's been shot down and under enemy fire. And so the first thing she does is she engineers, devises this scheme to destroy an enemy tank with a helicopter that only has a couple of guns on it. And she does that. And then when her helicopter is shot down, then she leads her crew through a very dark and dangerous night with enemy all around. And then finally in the morning, she ends up sacrificing her life so that her crew and the wounded from the other crew could escape safely. And so Colonel Serling gets this report, and it looks like it's going to be kind of an open-shut case. It's obvious, very little in the way of needed clarity, until he starts interviewing the witnesses. And this is why I don't have a movie clip to show you today, because if I were going to show this the way I wanted to, you'd have to see nearly the entire movie. The same scene, exact same scene, is played out several different times throughout the movie. But with each witness, the interpretation of what happens is very different. So one witness says she's a hero. She deserves the Medal of Honor. The next witness says she's a coward. Another guy, he thinks the world of Captain Walden, but he passed out from his wounds and doesn't remember all of it. And so it goes. 3, 4, 5, 6 different retellings of exactly the same story. The way the copter brought down the tank, the way the copter was shot down, that dark night, and the argument between Walden and her headstrong sergeant who wanted to leave the wounded behind so a few of them could escape the enemy under the cover of darkness. And the story keeps getting retold. And with each retelling, it gets murkier and murkier and murkier. And you know, Colonel Serling, all he wants to do is just find out what happened. He has his own demons, and he's taken this as sort of a personal thing because he sees himself in many of the characters of this story that plays itself out. And he wants to know who she is. if she is who they say she is. Let's sing.
I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. Body bound and drenched in tears, the Son of God in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still and all alone.
So I thought about that story as I thought about what I would say to you today, because, you know, this is just, I know I've said this before, this is such a strange season. I've been planning these things for the last 34 years, every year planning a great big celebration at Easter time. And for the last 62 years, I have been a part of big, well-planned Easter celebrations. It's just what we do. And this year, as I've said before, so different. I mean, except for the sanctuary here and the lights in the hallway that go down to the bathroom, place is dark. In fact, I was just thinking, I went back to the fellowship hall this week to go find a ladder. I think it's the first time anybody turned on a light in the fellowship hall in a month. We didn't even bother to turn on the narthex lights when we came in here this morning. Place is dark. There are no high school kids setting tables and preparing Easter breakfast. There's no crowds milling around. There's no organ and trumpet. We could probably do that, but without a congregation to sing with them, it just wouldn't be the same. And, you know, I thought about all of that, and you know, we pastors, we're sort of dialed into doing it that way. Those of us that are in the pastor business, we like big celebrations like that, and we try to create them. But I wonder, I've been thinking about that, and it occurred to me yesterday when I was getting the sermon ready, that maybe all along, this is the way it's supposed to be. Maybe we've been missing something. Because you see, big celebrations, they have a way of creating an air of certainty, which is really nice. But if you read the story, that certainty isn't always there in such a firm way. So let's take a minute here and kind of do what Colonel Serling did. Let's take a look at the story, examine the story. Let's interview the witnesses and see what really happens. So the story. This is the story of the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus was dead, now he's alive. He's here and he's with us. It is the core story of our Christian faith. And I want you to notice something. I want you to notice that there are no choirs of angels singing his praises. There are no cosmic fireworks. There is no light streaming out of the open tomb as the stone jiggles itself loose and rolls itself away. And this one's really important. There is not a single breathing soul who actually sees Jesus coming out of the tomb on that first Easter morning. It just doesn't happen that way. And then there's the witnesses. In John's gospel, there are 3 witnesses. And I want to go through each one of them because each one of them, it's like the witnesses in Courage Under Fire. Each one of them see essentially the same things, but they have very different takes on what happens. First, there's Mary. And she comes to the tomb, and it is dark. And that darkness is sort of a mirror image of her life, especially the last couple of days. Because just a couple of days earlier, she watched as her teacher and her friend was brutally murdered. And he was dead. Dead as dead could be. No escaping it. So presumably she spent the weekend with the other disciples. They were afraid. They were hiding because they thought that maybe the people who did this to Jesus might come after them. They were also probably in shock because the events of these last few days, I mean, they just came like a ton of bricks. Before this, Jesus is on top of the world. Just a week earlier, he rides into Jerusalem as a conquering hero. So they're probably afraid. They're probably in shock. And certainly they're mourning the loss of their friend. And so she comes to the tomb while it's still dark. And she sees that the stone is rolled away. And I want you to notice, she doesn't shout into the tomb, Christ is risen. No. He's dead. She saw it. And you can't reverse that. So instead, she runs back to Peter and John, and she tells them that someone has taken his body. So a little later, she comes back to the tomb, second visit. She looks inside the tomb. She sees the 2 angels. They talk to her. She turns around. There's Jesus. She looks at him. She doesn't recognize him. She thinks it's the gardener. And I know some people have said, well, it's still dark. No, that's not what's going on. She sees, but she doesn't see. And until Jesus calls her by name and says, Mary, until that time, she sees everything, but she can't see anything at all. So now there's Peter and John, kind of in the middle of that story. And Mary comes to them, tells them the body's gone, and they run to the tomb. And they both see the same thing. They both run to the tomb. They both go inside the tomb. They both see the grave clothes that are piled up in the grave, and the napkin that was covering his face on Friday, it's rolled up and set aside in a place all of its own. And John, upon seeing all of this, we are told he believes. Peter, on the other hand, sees exactly the same thing. But there is no mention of Peter believing. At least not yet. And he leaves the tomb as uncertain as when he entered the tomb. See what I mean? The more we examine the story, the more we interview the witnesses, the murkier it gets. And I will tell you that the people who wrote this, they didn't try to fix things. They didn't try to clean it up and sanitize it and make all of their versions work together as a single thing to try to get the story straight so that might lend more credibility to it. No, they just tell the story as it is, each in their own way, with all the discrepancies and all the witnesses and all the variations and everything else. They just tell it as it is, knowing full well that as they tell this story, the way they tell it, that it's going to create more questions than it does provide answers. And then there's the 3 at the tomb. And two of them we really like. John sees the tomb, the grave clothes, the napkin. He believes. Mary, she sees the grave, the angels, Jesus himself, and eventually she sees everything when she is called by name. And those two we like because there's a lot of certainty in that one. But then there's Peter, the head disciple, who sees exactly the same thing that John sees. And he comes away uncertain. I think I'm going to stop there. Let's sing.
And on the third at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. O trample death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God.
So, here we are. It's Easter morning. Place is dark. There's nobody around. Everybody is huddled in their homes. And some of us are huddled there because of the virus. Some of us are there because of economic reasons. Some of us are there facing the same problems of life we always face, even if there wasn't a virus out there. And all of us, in some way, shape, or form, are facing a future of some uncertainty. And you know, I have to say that in terms of this Easter celebration, I would much prefer to have all of you here. It's way more fun to have that Easter that I've known for the 62 years of my life. That said, isn't there something authentic about what's happening right now with the way we tell the Easter story? I mean, Easter is not some bombastic plastic thing that we put together once a year to lift our spirits. It is to lift our spirits, but it's not plastic. It's real. It comes right where you are right now. Easter is here as you worry about what comes next with your financial life. Easter is here as you live in fear of a virus that might just come to your home. Easter is here as we live together closely with our families, more closely than we've ever lived with our families before, because we can't send them off to work and we can't send them off to school. They're right there, and Easter is there in the midst of some of the tensions and the troubles that all of that brings. Easter's there in the messiness of a messy world. It's right there. It's not plastic. It's not artificial. It's not something we drag out once a year. It is Jesus has died, and now he's risen. He's here with you now. And it is so fantastic, so unbelievable, that probably the best way to express it is not with a shout of "He is risen," and the entire congregation saying, "He is risen indeed," in loud, boisterous ways. But instead, it's so fantastic that you're not even sure it could possibly be true. And so you whisper it. Did you just see what I saw? Did you just hear what I heard? He's risen. And if he's done that, if he's conquered even death, he is also there in my fear to bring peace. He is also there in my messiness to bring forgiveness and life and hope and promise. He is there now, creating unspeakable miracles in real, everyday life. So I want to close by telling you about a guy that I was introduced to a couple years ago. My son, who happens to be here, he must have just gotten off call, Christian. There's about 8 or 9 of us in the building is all. He said, "Dad, I'm going to send you this link. I want you to listen to this guy. This guy by the name of John Prine." And it was a song about a lake in southern Wisconsin. And it's just, I mean, the words are catchy. The tune is even catchier. And he takes such simple ideas and he turns them into such profound messages. Well, John died this last week. And even though you've not heard, he died of the coronavirus, even though you maybe have not heard of him, I will tell you that people like Johnny Cash knew him. Bob Dylan respected him. It was once said that Johnny Cash once said that if I want to write a really good song, I'm going to listen to John Prine's music. And I will tell you that when it comes to seeing unseen things and seeing the miracles in life, John gets it. He sees. And that seeing didn't come through certainty, because there was a lot of uncertainty in his life. There was a lot of messiness. When he lived hard. And when he drank hard. And he had a couple of failed marriages and 2 bouts with cancer. And through it all, John writes these simple lyrics with messages that are so wise and so profound, that messages that see beyond what the eye can see and hear what the ear can hear. Messages of resurrection, of heaven, of hope, of new life. So I want to leave you with this song today. And I want you to remember this Easter, not for the big bombastic service that didn't happen, but for the way we got back to the story as it really was. And in the uncertainty, and in the doubt, and in the trials, and in the trouble, something fantastic happens. So fantastic that they didn't shout it. They didn't announce it. They whispered it to each other as though it's barely believable. He is risen. He's risen. Shelley?
When I get to heaven, I'm going to shake God's hand. I'm going to thank him for more blessings than one man can stand. Then I'm going to get a guitar and start a rock and roll band. Check into a swell hotel. Ain't the afterlife grand? Then I'm gonna get a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm gonna kiss that pretty girl on the tilt-a-whirl, 'cause this old man is going to town. Then, as God is my witness, I'm getting back into show business. I'm gonna open a nightclub called the Tree of Forgiveness and forgive everybody who ever done me any harm. Why, I might even forgive a few choice critics, those syphilitic parasitics. Buy 'em a pint of Smithwick's and smother 'em with my charm. 'Cause I'm gonna get a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm gonna kiss that pretty girl on the tilt-a-whirl, 'cause this old man is going to town. Here we go, boys. Ya-da-da, skee-da-ba-doo-doo. Ya-da, ya-da-da-da-da-da-da. Skee-da-da-doo-doo. Da-da-doo-doo. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, when I get to heaven, I'm gonna take this wristwatch off my arm. What are you gonna do with time after you bought the farm? Then I'm gonna look up my mom and dad. And good old brother Doug, why, I bet him and cousin Jackie are still cutting up a rug. And I wanna see all my mama's sisters, 'cause that's where all the love starts. Miss them all like crazy, bless their little hearts. 'Cause I'm gonna have a cocktail, vodka and ginger ale. Yeah, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette that's 9 miles long. I'm gonna kiss that pretty girl on the tilt-a-whirl, 'cause this old man is going to town. Yeah-da-da, yeah-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah-da-da-da-da-da-da. See-da-da-da-da-da. See-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah-da-da-da-da-da.
Yep, and it all begins in the shadows of the night, in a place where the dead are supposed to stay dead. In darkness and in trial and trouble, in the messiness of life, he comes. He is risen. He's risen.